The Nintendo 64 era was such an exciting and memorable time for gaming. I mean, probably. I was only a few months old at the time the N64 was released, but just the thought of so many big series getting their first releases into 3D environments had to be so hype. Nintendo was the biggest developer of games for their system for obvious reasons, but for me the best games on the console were developed by Rare. GoldenEye, Donkey Kong 64, and Banjo-Kazooie are probably the first games that come to mind when thinking about classic Rare N64 games, but my favorite out of their collection is definitely CONKER'S Bad Fur Day. During a time where most games were made to be family friendly, especially from Nintendo, CONKER'S broke the mold with its adult themes, crew jokes, and innuendos shoehorned into practically every interaction in the game. If you were ignorant to the M rating on the cover, you'd probably think you were purchasing the perfect game for your 8-year-old child, only to come back a few hours later to this. This game's speedrun is also really cool, so in today's video, I'm going to be covering the world record run by Arbliterator and explain all the tricks along the way. I hope you all enjoy. So the game opens up to a very grumpy looking Conker with a crown on his head and a glass of milk in hand. As the camera pans out, he recants the past 24 hours that landed him in the throne as the king of the land, as well as who the goofy cast of characters surrounding him are. Our story starts with Conker leaving his girlfriend Barry a voicemail that he's going to be home late as he formulates an excuse to drink all night with his friends. Conker gets a bit carried away though, as he can be seen vomiting upon leaving the bar as he heads through a storm to get back home. Meanwhile, the Panther King, the current ruler of the kingdom, can be seen enjoying a glass of milk. That is until one of the legs on the table gives out, spilling the milk on the floor, enraging the king. In the morning, Conker wakes up hungover in the mud, and will slowly stumble around this gate into the field to meet a scarecrow named Birdie. Birdie teaches Conker about the B buttons on the ground, which give context-sensitive abilities and items to Conker, like water to cure his hangover. Next, Conker will need to get out of this area, so we'll head across the water, jumping in and out of it to move a bit faster. This is the tutorial area, so there are a few spots where the game will stop to teach Conker techniques, like high jumping and hovering. But in a speedrun, we can simply hit the trigger to learn how to hover, jump backwards, and then hover over the thought bubble trigger, saving about 1 second. At the top of this platforming section is a gargoyle blocking the way, and in order to progress, we'll pull down this nearby lever to open a door from below. In here, there's a key running around the room. The fastest way to deal with this is to chase the key, getting it as close to the door as possible. We'll want Conker to always be moving here, as we're waiting for an event to trigger to give Conker a frying pan, and it won't activate until he's moved enough. Ideally, we'll get this to occur with the key next to the door, and Conker facing away with the key still in view, to ensure the key doesn't get any invincibility frames. Once the pan is obtained, we can hit the key, and upon picking it up, start the next cutscene immediately, then exit. We can then hit the gargoyle off the bridge with a frying pan, and then use the nearby B button to clear the path and exit the area. On Conker's way home, he consistently gets distracted, taking on several different odd jobs and missions, collecting cash anywhere he can come across it. His first mission is to return the beehive to the queen bee, which is easy enough. On the way there, we can jump down from this cliff and avoid fall damage by hovering just before landing. This is a useful trick, as falls can either do 1 damage, or they'll kill Conker instantly, so it's best to play it safe in most cases. Movement is relatively straightforward in this game, as Conker's standard run speed is usually the fastest you can go, but over certain terrain like the yellow ground texture while heading up this path, it's faster to spam jumps. Pretty much anytime you see Arbliterator jumping, just assume it's probably to move slightly faster. This mission is pretty simple. As long as Conker remains moving while avoiding the slow terrain, we'll get to the bottom easily, avoiding the wasps. The beehive then converts into a minigun and takes out the wasps, and we're awarded the first cash bounty. There is another strat that can be done here called Hive Skip, where instead of carrying the hive down the hill, we throw it into the river and then carry it the rest of the way. This is only viable in the N64 due to lag, but it does save roughly 12 seconds. Next, Arb will hit the nearby B button to use the slingshot on these beetles that are blocking the path ahead. Slingshotting is kind of tricky without a proper crosshair, but being an experienced runner, they clear through it quickly. Next, we can head up to the Barn Boys area, jumping over the geometry here for a more direct line, as well as a cutscene skip, saving a little bit of time. In Barn Boys, we first talk to a metal crate named Jack, whose girlfriend won't get off him until the nearby mouse Marvin is dealt with. Arb will then traverse through the area delivering 3 pieces of cheese, with the only thing needed to be worried about are Marvin's burps after delivering the cheese, which if contact is made, causes Conker to vomit, losing a ton of time. After the final piece of cheese is delivered, Marvin will blow up from the gas buildup, and we'll be able to proceed up the barn. This game does have a few movement-related tech you can see sprinkled in throughout the run. For instance, during the climb here, we can see a backwards momentum jump, which is performed by holding the analog stick in the opposite direction you're currently moving in, and jumping to conserve momentum. On the top of the barn, Arb will press this button to open a door to the building, and then head inside, completely ignoring the cache nearby. Upon entering the building, we'll talk to the pitchfork named Frankie, which begins chasing Conker around the area. We'll want to redirect his attacks into all the piles of hay, taking them each out one by one. This is one of the more heavy RNG sections of the run, and it's even possible to take out 2 to 3 haystacks with one attack. After the last stack is taken out, Arb will position Conker in front of this lever, and then jump onto it 2 seconds after Frankie says, "This is too much." This causes Conker to warp back to the lever after the cutscene is skipped, and opens up another entry into the barn. After taking out the haystacks, Frankie begins getting grilled by the paint can and brush as they disparage him for his performance, and even go as far as to tell him to kill himself. So in defiance, he ties a rope around his neck off the ceiling. Except, he's not able to hang himself because he doesn't even have a neck, so we'll need to go upstairs to free him. After heading outside, we'll speak to the king bee who wants to pollinate the nearby sunflower with large breasts, but we'll deal with this later. For now, we'll jump on this wooden crate and head inside the top of the barn. From here, Arb will jump over the support beams, picking up 2 pieces of chocolate along the way to max out Conker's health, and then use a context-sensitive pad to throw knives at the rope, freeing Frankie. For some reason, 4 knives need to be thrown before Frankie can be released, so the first 4 can be thrown anywhere as long as the last is thrown directly at the rope. Arb will put the knives away just before the cutscene plays to be able to move sooner afterwards. Next is the first big skip of the speedrun, Haybot skip. Normally here we're supposed to head downstairs and fight Haybot, but by hovering into one of these beams and tapping A at a specific rhythm, it's possible to clip out of bounds and head right into the Haybot 2 fight. This saves up to 30 seconds and removes additional possible time loss due to RNG in the Haybot 1 fight. During this fight, Arb will bait missile launches from the bot into 3 different pipes, which will blow holes into each of them. Water will begin running out of the pipes, which we can lure the bot into to short circuit it, and then once in the center, punch the red button on the back to deal damage. The main time save here is charging towards the Haybot while shooting missiles to immediately aggro it and lead it into the water. After the final missile shot, the bot will do 5 hops before it begins looking around, but as long as Conker stands nearby, he'll get aggroed towards him, saving a few seconds. Following his fight, we'll need to begin climbing up the tower as the water fills up the chamber. Along the way, there will be several context-sensitive pads to knock out the electrical wires, which if allowed to make contact with the water, will electrocute Conker. After all 6 wires are taken out, Conker is able to exit the area. Outside of here, there will be a monk with a stone tablet to launch Conker towards some money, and after grabbing it, we can exit the barn. Now we just need to finish up the King Bee's quest. First we'll head over to the sunflower, but she doesn't really feel like dealing with Conker, and makes him go away. In order to get on her good side, we'll need to collect groups of bees around the area that will begin tickling her upon arrival. The first group can be found on the pathway to the barn. After grabbing them, Arb will head back to the wooden crate to get on the sledge, and then from the ledge, jump to the roof to grab another wad of cash, as well as a second group of bees. The third group of bees can be found while climbing up the ladders on the bowl over the roof of the barn. Once reaching the top, Conker can jump off this plank to turn into an anvil, and press the button below, opening a hidden tunnel. From here, Arb will jump down from the bowl and hover as late as possible to land on this cliff and slide down near the pieces of cheese. The fourth group of bees can be grabbed here, and then we'll head below to grab a wad of cash. Upon exiting, Arb will head back to the start of the area to grab the final set of bees, and then finally lead them to the sunflower. The bees will begin tickling the sunflower, and as she opens up, the king bee hops in to, pollinate her. Conker isn't left out as the third wheel as she offers him 2 bouncy platforms leading to the final wad of cash in the area, clearing the Barn Boys chapter. Cutting back to the Panther King and figuring out how he fits into the story, his servant Professor Von Cripplesback has been doing some thorough research to fix the leg on the table. As we can see from his notes, a potted plant won't fit, an elephant won't fit, but a squirrel is actually the perfect height to fill the gap. Easily convinced, the Panther King orders the servants to begin hunting for a red squirrel. Well, if you've got some spare wads of cash lying around and don't eat anything other than giant blocks of chocolate like Conker, then today's video sponsor Factor is perfect for you. Factor is the best food delivery service out there, sending out fresh, never frozen prepackaged meals straight to your doorstep. Factor is perfect for busybodies that don't always have time to prepare 3 meals a day, but don't want to resort to costlier and unhealthier options like takeout or your typical food delivery. No matter the case, Factor has options for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, with an expansive menu of 35 different items to choose from weekly, as well as 60 add-ons, including different snacks and beverages. Factor meals are so convenient as they heat up in as little as 2 minutes in the microwave, with no worries of cleaning up afterwards, so you can spend more time locking in on whatever you do best. And right now there's no better time to try out Factor, because by using my code EZScapeOctober50 at checkout, you can get 50% off your first box, as well as 20% off your next order. Link will be in both the pinned comment and description. Special thanks again to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to the speedrun. Afterwards, we'll head out of the area and then head to the cabin in the Poo area. While in this area, it's always faster to jump rather than run through the poo on the ground. After entering the cabin, we'll be greeted by the dung beetle secretary, who offers to make Conker balls of poo if he can get the cows in the nearby area to poop. We'll then need to use a few rope swings to progress forward, and after making our way through the area, we'll enter the bowl section. After entering, we can climb upwards to reach a wheel, and after rotating it, prune juice will dispense into the cow's trough. The bull found below isn't fond of Conker's red fur, and will begin to chase him around once he's in view. By luring him into this target, we can open up a crate to release a cow onto the grass. For the smaller targets like this, Arb will then jump into the water briefly to manipulate the bull into charging forward sooner. After it hits this big target, Conker can take control over the bull and charge him into the cow. Charging the cow will cause it to switch from eating grass to drinking the prune juice, and once the juice is consumed, it will begin filling up the basin with poo. Then the cow will need to be charged one more time to remove it from the hole. We'll need to repeat the process 2 additional times, requiring an extra hit each time new cattle spawns before they'll drink the prune juice. Once the final cow is removed, the grates covering the hole will give out, dropping the bull below. By holding jump as Arb enters the next load zone, allows them to buffer the input frame perfectly upon loading in, which can be used to jump over the wall out of bounds to jump straight to the nearby money. At this point, Conker doesn't know how to swim, since we're supposed to learn it from a context button, but it's still possible to leave this room by jumping high up and performing a dive to push Conker deep enough into the water to get around the wall. For some reason, this will automatically teach Conker how to swim, meaning with this, we can skip the swim tutorial altogether, saving up to 15 seconds. Unfortunately for Arb, this trick is a lot harder on the Xbox Series consoles due to faster loads, and they miss it in this run. So they go grab the money and learn swim the intended way. After exiting the cabin, Arb will buffer another jump input to skip Conker equipping the mask, and begin rolling balls of poo that enlarge in size when moved across the area. While heading up this path scaling the mountainside, there will be a handful of beetles patrolling the area, and can waste a bit of time if we run into them. The first beetle can be avoided simply by jumping, and then Arb will hold C down on the camera to set up the beetles on cycle so that they're never in the way, saving several seconds. After reaching the end of the path, Conker will place a TNT inside the ball of poo and roll it into the mouth of a dung beetle, blowing him up to clear the path. While remaining on cycle, Arb grabs another ball and rolls it up to the newly cleared path leading to the top of the mountain, using another C down strat to get past the final beetle towards the top. Even though Poo Mountain is opened up, it's quicker to instead jump to the top of the mountain to grab some cash, and then jump down to grab one more ball to throw down this fence to take out a guard blocking this peg. After interacting with a peg, Conker will activate it, flushing the enemies out of the water. In the next area, some catfish offer Conker a cash reward if he's able to take out the bull dog fish thing guarding their valuables. Nearby the dogfish is a passageway to Bat's tower. In the tower, we're introduced to a cog with split personalities, looking for his lady cog friends that must have ran off. Arb wastes no time in helping this man out by heading up the lift, hovering around a cutscene trigger, and gliding into a nearby log to clip out of bounds. This clip is pretty crazy because it warps Conker all the way to the top of the tower, skipping a somewhat lengthy platforming section. Once at the top, Arb will need to do a sketchy glide around an invisible wall to reach his wad of cash instantly, and then can jump from here to hit a lever leading to another section of the tower. Arb will then do some precise jumps downwards, falling the perfect distance to not die, and lands in the water. From here we can head through the open gate and grab the first red cog on the other side, just outside the entrance. Arb will then need to bring each cog back and forth back to the main room. There's not too much else to point out other than the remainder cogs can't be hit from their starting positions, so Arb will chase them around to the other side and hit them near the exit. Once the final cog is placed, the wheel in the center can be spun around to shorten the dogfish's leash, granting Conker and the catfish access to the safe. Upon entering, the cache inside will spot Conker and begin running away deeper within the chamber. First, Arb will need to open this door by spelling open using the slingshot. In this run, they manage to hit O quickly enough to just barely hit P before it gets covered, allowing for a pretty fast section. This opens up the floor leading to the water level portion of the game, Clang's Lair. By swimming directly downwards and hugging the wall, Arb is able to just barely come in contact with the air dispensers to replenish Conker's oxygen, allowing them to never stop moving, and then slide right past the Clang patrolling the area. Arb will first go through the green tunnel, pop out of the water for air, dive back down through the blue tunnel, and then re-emerge to pull this lever, opening the exit to the lair. Arb will then head back through the green and yellow tunnels to reach the exit passageway, hugging the walls once again to avoid the Clang. Next we'll enter the boiler room. Upon entering, Conker stumbles across some fire imps smoking cigarettes and drinking lighter fluid. The two notice Conker, taking interest in his flammable fur. The one shoves a cigarette up his ass for some reason, and then they take cover, waiting to pounce on Conker. Before approaching the imps, Arb will drink from the nearby keg and begin golden showering the enemies. It's important that Arb takes out all 8 of these imps in one drunk cycle, because once it ends, Conker gets hungover and will need to stumble over to the first aid kit to sober up, just to get drunk all over again. Luckily here for Arb, the tail end of the stream manages to hit the final imp, and we move on to the boss fight of the area. The fire imps enter a boiler, drop its balls of brass, and begin chasing Conker around the area. The boss fight here has a bit of RNG involved depending on which corner of the room the boiler faces. In this case, Arb gets really good luck as the boiler is facing Conker at the start, meaning they can pull the lever dispensing what I can assume to be poo all over him. This will cause the boiler to step back, allowing Conker to hit its balls with bricks. After sustaining several brutal hits to the family jewels, the boiler's balls literally fly off, disabling the machine. Afterwards, the balls can be found lying around the room, the first being used to open up this door, and the other to roll down the hallway, taking out the goblin and the wall behind it. Leading through the wall is the exit, as well as the catfish's wad of cash. After exiting, Conker learns that the fortune he was seeking was only a measly $10 and decides to keep the entirety of it for himself. Obviously this riles up the catfish, but before anything else happens, the rope attached to the dogfish begins getting loose. The catfish make their way out of the vicinity, with Conker following closely behind. Once Conker touches the river, the dogfish gets loose and begins chasing him. Arb then does a quick jump, hover, and then dives under the water to avoid the dogfish's attack. By staying close to the bottom of the water and hugging the walls, the dogfish will not only not be able to attack Conker, but it will also swim past the catfish, meaning the cutscenes of them getting ripped to shreds get skipped, saving about 3 seconds overall. Upon reaching the end of the river, the dogfish will begin chomping its way through the dock, chasing after Conker. Conker narrowly avoids its final chomp, causing it to get trapped on land. Conker can then use the body to bounce up to the sledge, collecting $300. A pretty big upgrade over the $10 reward. Arb then exits the area and heads back to Poo Mountain to finally head inside. Upon entering, Conker bumps into a dung beetle who is in a big hurry to get out of the mountain. He explains that some sort of monster had just snatched up his friends and recommends that Conker doesn't bother entering for his own safety. But of course he mentions that there's some money lying around in the area, so naturally Conker proceeds anyways. The ominous figure requests some of the sweet corn lying around the area. After throwing the first piece of corn in the center, everyone's favorite boss, the Great Mighty Poo, is summoned. The movement of the remaining corn is completely random, so Arb will begin trekking through the rest of the area, hitting whichever corn is standing closest to the center, and chasing the others closer to the platform before picking them up. For the final set of 3 corn, Arb attempts to scare the ones on the left to push them around the other way, and then jumps across, grabbing the closest one to the center. By doing this, it's possible that the scared corn gets hit by the Mighty Poo's hand, saving a bit of time. Unfortunately for Arb, this inconsistent strat wouldn't work out as the corn gets too close to Conker before the hand spawns, requiring them to grab the corn the old-fashioned way. Oh well. Upon throwing the final piece of corn, the Great Mighty Poo boss fight begins, as well as his legendary song. But of course, this is a speedrun, so not only will Arb be skipping all of the cutscenes, but they'll also be throwing the toilet paper into his mouth the second he begins hitting his high notes, ending them instantly. The boss will always throw 6 balls of poo before it begins singing, all of which can be manipulated by jumping as he throws them to throw off his aim. Each phase requires an additional roll of toilet paper to be thrown each time. The first 2 phases are pretty easy and straightforward, but for the third phase, the boss will randomly change his position just before he begins singing. There's only 3 spots he can be in, and since we can eliminate the spot he begins in, it's pretty much just a 50-50 shot where to aim at. But there should always be enough time to react to wherever he ends up, like Arb demonstrates here. After throwing the final roll of toilet paper, the boss will hit his final high note in a pitch strong enough to break the glass, exposing the wad of cash as well as the lever. Arb makes their way around to collect the cash and pull the lever to flush the Great Mighty Poo, finishing the chapter. Following the end of this chapter, the game cuts to Barry in the middle of another one of her dancing workouts. She hears a knock at the door that she assumes is Conker, but it ends up being a rock monster instead, who knocks her out and kidnaps her away. Back to the speedrun, Arb will begin heading down the giant hole that's appeared inside the mountain. The only thing to point out in this section are these spinning blades that if touched kill Conker instantly. I don't know if it's just me, but my depth perception in this section is awful, and I find it so difficult to avoid these blades quickly, but Arb manages to barely slide through just in time. This leads to a small tunnel, and then a short platforming section for Conker to climb ropes and ladders, all while avoiding the nearby spinning blades. Once at the top, Conker will bump into 2 guards blocking access to the area for an exorbitant $1,000 to proceed. Conker pays up, but then the guard remarks that Conker seems to fit the description for the red squirrel they're looking for. But Conker is able to convince him that he's actually an elephant, and ends up being allowed to walk right past, and even calls the money back over to him. This section of the game has a prehistoric vibe to it, with dinosaurs patrolling this temple. Arb jumps to avoid the dinos, but unfortunately gets bit by one while platforming upwards. At the top there's a statue, and when it's interacted with 3 times, drops the statue below, granting access to the cave. Once below, the statue needs to be hit 1 more time to open up the path. Arb even manages to do a little slide off with the anvil to save a bit of time. We'll then make our way over to the rock solid nightclub to grab a boulder. The nearby rock monsters will aggro onto Conker, so when this happens, it's best to jump to avoid their attacks, and then continue rolling it along. Upon reaching this passageway, Conker will roll the boulder downhill, taking out the cavemen and the wall below. This leads to the main chamber with a giant dinosaur head in the center. In the far back right of the room, there's a door that opens up to the next section. In this section, Conker finds a giant dinosaur egg, and he sits on top of it until it hatches. The dino named Loopy thinks Conker's its mother, and begins following him around the path. Along the way, Loopy will eat each of the cavemen it runs into, but by staying the max distance away from Loopy while keeping him locked onto Conker, he'll sometimes skip eating the cavemen, saving a bit of time. The most important thing is to ensure that Loopy continues following Conker as he walks through the door, or he won't be able to move to the next room. Back in the main chamber, Arb will lead Loopy off this ledge to save a bit of time. In the center of the room, we can find a context-sensitive pad, as well as some cavemen worshipping the dino head. While Loopy devours the caveman, Arb will shoot this button to raise a nearby lift. After doing so, Loopy should conveniently be standing closer to the platform after eating the second caveman. Then Arb will lure Loopy onto the platform and hit the other button on the wall to crush him. This sacrifice opens up the mouth of the giant dino head. From here, Arb will use a monk with a stone tablet to land on top of the dino's head and interact with each of its nostrils, filling them with black pepper. This will cause it to sneeze, clearing the green slime away from its mouth. Arb will use the monk once more to go to the top of the head to grab some cash. Now at this point you would normally go head into the dino mouth, leading to the next section, but for some reason by going back through the right side door again, the game just warps us exactly where the dino head exits to. Then Conker loots a caveman outfit from a dead body. Normally you'd need to traverse backwards through the dino head to get back, but by death abusing, we're reloaded at the bottom of the room and can exit out the door to reach the main chamber. Apparently the dead body Conker looted was the leader of the cavemen, so when Conker comes outside, they begin following him around, thinking he's a resurrected king. Then Arb heads back to the rock solid nightclub. There will be 4 rock monsters lying around the area, and each one needs to be struck by Conker's frying pan, signaling the cavemen to take each of them out. The cavemen can be a bit annoying to deal with, as if they hit Conker, he can sometimes get launched flying backwards, but Arb manages to get through the section relatively unscathed. The crew will confront the bouncer to be let in, but he won't budge without the password. Luckily, one of the cavemen happens to know it offhand, and he lets Conker and friends inside. Once inside the club, the objective is to free Barry, who is trapped inside. First, Arb will go behind the counter to move this boulder up the ramp and onto the switch to open a door. This starts the puzzle section that will need another boulder to complete. In order to get the second boulder, Conker will drink from the keg to get drunk, and use his piss to push one of the rock monsters through the doorway. Unfortunately, even after pushing him through the door, Conker is still drunk, and we can't sober him up until he's hungover, so Arb will just wait by the first aid kit until the effect wears off. Afterwards, Arb will push the rock past some rock monster strippers, and leave it on another switch, opening another doorway. Arb will have to go through a similar process as the last, pushing 2 additional rock monsters through the new openings. This will cause one of the rocks to land on Barry's cage, freeing her, as well as a wad of cash. She escapes, but doesn't even notice Conker because of his outfit. Arb grabs the cash and attempts to exit the club, but Conker is stopped at the door by the bouncer, who noticed him stealing the cash, and is told that he needs to speak with the boss, Don Weezo. The boss can be seen getting a back rub from Barry, who still doesn't recognize Conker with the outfit on. She shortly leaves afterwards, and the two discuss business. Apparently the boss is sick of dealing with the cavemen in the area, and requests that Conker bombs them to clear them out. In return, Conker is allowed to keep the money. Arb then begins a long trek back to the area once more, carrying the bomb to the same place we found the dead king at. The main thing to worry about is avoiding the caveman hitting Conker on his way through, and there's also a ledge that can be dropped down from that won't do enough damage to blow up the bomb by holding towards the wall to land sooner. Then Arb will head into the dino's mouth. Upon entering the mouth, the swinging uvulas are on a set cycle, so as long as you hold forward without ever slowing down Conker, you'll be able to reach the end unimpeded. Conker then throws a bomb into the lava, causing it to rise, as well as some platforms to get across. In the next area, Conker is knocked out by a caveman. He wakes up shortly afterwards to a group of them mocking him for getting robbed for all his cash. One of the cavemen ends up falling off their board while making fun of Conker, so they insist on him using the vacant jet board to race them for the money back. As for clearing the section optimally, Arb will start by jumping through the load zone to set up the race on a specific cycle. All 3 cavemen need to be killed throughout the race in order to finish the section. What normally occurs during this race is that after the first 2 cavemen are killed, a gate drops blocking the normal path, and you need to traverse a longer extended course instead. That is unless you're extremely good at the game like Arb is, because in this run, they managed to skip the 3rd lap completely by killing the 3rd caveman super quickly before the gate can block the path. Not only does this save a ton of time, but this is also the most difficult trick in the run, so it was really impressive to see Arb pull this off here. After finishing the last caveman, the rest of the cash will be restored, and Arb can collect a wad of cash off this ramp. Conker ends up losing control of the jet board as he crashes into a coliseum, spectated by King Booga, his girlfriend Jugga, and their kingdom of cavemen. A drawbridge drops, releasing a bloodthirsty dino and the victims within the coliseum. After skipping the cutscenes, Arb will head straight for the context-sensitive pad to hypnotize the dino, allowing Conker to ride it. We'll then need to spend 3 rounds clearing out the cavemen in groups of 6s. The first wave the enemies will spawn in at random, and for the remainder they'll spawn in at set locations. To clear this section quickly, Arb will headbutt any cavemen that are close to the edge to push them into the lava, and for all others, just eat them normally. But we'll want to avoid doing this as much as possible because the animation is really slow. Arb did a really good job here clearing out the first wave, but the second wave went a little off the rails after a missed chomp on one of the cavemen. They'd managed to clean it up, however, and have a pretty decent 3rd wave. This segment can be really tough because the controls for the dino don't handle the best. Next up is the boss fight against King Booga himself. This fight is actually pretty easy. All you need to do is wait for Booga to jump, and after he lands you can headbutt him in the crotch, and then bite him in the ass. And then for the next 2 hits, you don't even need to wait for him to jump, so once he raises his club, repeat the same process again, and the boss is defeated. King Booga's drawers drop for everyone to see, and he runs off in embarrassment. Conker, completely forgetting he already has a girlfriend, attempts to flirt with Jugga, but gets rejected. She leaves him by the exit, thus concluding the Prehistoric chapter. Arb then makes her way out of the area, grabbing a wad of cash on the way out, as well as using clever platforming tricks like frying pan cancels to cancel landing lag. Arb will also need to traverse back through the poo area and exit out of the poo cabin to return back to the hub. Upon exiting, Conker will see the beehive being stolen by the wasps. The writing in this section is honestly pretty cool, because I guess we can just skip talking to the queen bee and go straight for the hive. And the way Arb does this is by climbing up Poo Mountain again and doing a really precise jump to reach the wad of cash you would normally reach by going through the hive. So not only does this grab the cash right away, but also gives quick access inside to collect the beehive. This can be reached a bit quicker with a jump. Since the beehive also doubles as a turret, Conker hops inside and begins taking out all the wasps. So obviously it's fastest to shoot each wasp as quickly as possible, but it's more optimal to shoot manually rather than holding down the Z button because it will cause the gun to reload way more often. The wasps spawn in the same location every time, so top runners will memorize exactly where they come in at. Once they're cleared out, Conker can grab the hive and head outside while being chased by the wasps. The route back is exactly the same as before, and Arb gets the hive back, easy peasy. At this point we can now finally afford to pay the barrel at the top of Windy, so Arb will head up the path to the windmill, avoiding the worms along the way. The first 4 can be a bit of a pain, but for the last you can just hover along the right wall. Conker will pay the barrel for a ride, but along the way down he'll lose control and the barrel goes flying, crashing right into a dam at the end of the river. Conker then takes it upon himself to explore the tunnel. Once inside, we'll just need to pull a lever to open up the front gate to a graveyard. Outside, Conker bumps into Greg the Grim Reaper. Greg entices Conker with the spoils of the undead and arms them with a shotgun to take them out. Arb enters the graveyard and then does something I somehow never thought of and hops on a grave in the center to shoot all the zombies from a vantage point. For this section, 12 zombies in total will need to be cleared out before Greg allows us to proceed to the next section. Headshots are preferred as they'll kill the zombies instantly. After doing so, Greg will open the gate to a castle that can be reached after clearing another sketchy worm section. Again, just jumping around them is the best thing you can do here, but they can be really sketchy because getting bit can result in falling off the path. Upon entering the castle, Conker is greeted by his great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, who wines and dines him as he gives a lengthy retelling of his past. In reality though, he was just fattening up Conker to drink his blood, but the dinner gets interrupted by villagers. The Count takes advantage of Conker's presence and turns him into a vampire bat. We're then tasked with collecting 7 villagers in the area and delivering them to a meat grinder. While controlling the bat, there is some movement tech we can see Arb using in the background. Basically, the fastest way to move the bat is by descending as much as possible, because that's the only time it gains speed, just as long as you don't touch the ground. This can be used to snatch villagers, and if done while holding a villager in hand, will allow Conker to fly even faster while descending than usual. The bat segment takes just a few minutes, and there isn't too much else to point out here. Following the final villager delivery, the Count overindulges on the harvested blood, and his support rope can no longer hold his weight, resulting in him falling into the grinder himself. With the Count dead, Conker transforms back to his normal self. His problems aren't over yet, as zombies begin popping up everywhere, so it's probably about time to head out. Normally in this section you need to complete a lengthy puzzle within the castle to grab the key to the front door, but Arb just clips through a wall leading straight to the key. I swear this whole section took me at least a half hour if not longer to clear, and Arb finishes it in less than 2 minutes. After unlocking the front door, we can hightail it out of here by riding this barrel all the way back down the pathway with the worms, through the graveyard, and finally use it to get past a strong current upstream. From here, if we enter the tunnel, not only will we find some cash, but also find that it leads back to the waterfall from the very start, including the spooky portion of the game. After returning to Windy, the game is interrupted with an announcement from the military that we're going to war, and that they're looking for new recruits. In another ploy to make even more money, Conker sells his body to the military as we head off to the naval base. Upon entering, we can see a pilot dozing off in the cockpit as it gets shot out of the air by a submarine. The plane lands right in front of Conker, who looks a bit demoralized from the incident, but is instructed by the Squirrel High Command General to clear the plane out of the area to let a boat in. We'll start out by pushing this metal box all the way to the left and then head over to the bathroom to find a soldier with a comically large TNT strapped to the back. Conker can push him down the hill into the metal crate to stop him from sliding down too far, and then proceed to push him along the right side of the base. Along the way, there will be several mines hidden in the mud, but this is pretty easy to deal with for Arb since they have all their positions memorized. Apparently it is possible to push a TNT guy off the cliff to avoid using the metal box, but the strategy is so finicky and inconsistent, Arb doesn't bother using it. Anyways, once the TNT guy is put into place, this is a good time to restore the electricity to the base to be able to use the context-sensitive pad in the center. To do this, Conker needs to swim underneath each of these rings while being chased by an electric eel to turn the power back on. And once all 3 are activated, the power will be restored, and Conker can use a context-sensitive pad to blow up the TNT. One more TNT guy will need to be pushed along the other side, with Conker needing to avoid several moving crate traps. It is possible to reach these crates quickly enough to just hold forward through the whole thing, but Arb was slightly off cycle, so they decided to walk into the wall for a moment before moving forward, allowing them to maintain max speed with Conker while not getting crushed. After the second TNT is placed, we'll shoot it to blow up the other side of the plane, removing it out of the way for the boat to come through. We'll meet up with the general, who is pleased with Conker's effort, and rewards him by distracting him and knocking him out, probably knowing he wouldn't agree to what happens next. Conker wakes up on the boat wearing military equipment, surrounded by squirrels with machine guns. The boat arrives at the shore, the door drops, and the scene begins playing out exactly like the Omaha Beach scene from Saving Private Ryan. You see, apparently the squirrels are at war with the teddies, these robotic teddy bears controlled by Professor Von Cripplesback. Arb begins making their way through the barbed wire battlefield, using some clever jumps and crawls to progress through quickly. It's pretty much impossible to not get shot at least once here. After clearing the beach, we'll bump into one of the only squirrel survivors, and just as he gets to explaining the plan, he dies. Conker then equips himself with a lit cigar and dual wields machine guns to take on the teddies. Arb shoots out the lock on the door and heads inside. Upon entering, they're ambushed by the teddies, and they all need to be cleared out of this room before proceeding. Arb then needs to maneuver around these laser traps, which can potentially be really sketchy, because getting hit by a laser doesn't give any invincibility frames, and at least from my experience, it's possible to get killed instantly by one if you get really unlucky. While Arb proceeds through, I do want to talk a bit about the category they're running, since this section is so cool to watch completed quickly. So this category isn't actually any percent, but it's actually called Chapters 100%. The first distinction is that this game doesn't really have a 100% category, and the only difference between any percent and 100% is in 100% you grab an additional wad of cash, which is unnecessary to complete the game. This is the cash you get after jumping off the flower's breast from the beginning of the game. Chapters refers to starting the game from the chapter selection unlocked after beating the game. Compared to starting the game the normal way from a new file, chapter selection allows us to skip almost every cutscene in the game, making the game so much more enjoyable to speedrun. As a result, the 50 lives cheat is also allowed to be used because the game only starts with 2 lives, and since intentional deaths are needed in the speedrun route, they've decided to just allow the lives cheat since unintentional deaths will lose time anyways. Lastly, Arb is playing this on the Xbox Series S, which is the fastest way to play this game due to load times. Back to what's happening in the run, Arb enters the operating room and begins taking out all 8 teddies in the room one by one. Once the room is cleared out, Conker will attempt freeing the squirrel hostage, but no matter which lever is chosen, the poor guy gets electrocuted. The second lever opens up the door, and will proceed forward through the facility. In this next room, there's a teddy manning a turret. Arb will handle this the intended way by running around the room and using the context-sensitive pad to rocket launcher him off the gun. Normally here you would probably man the turret to take out the teddies in the back, but Arb just hops on it for a moment to activate them, and then takes them out with the gun in hand. There's not too much to point out here, other than several waves of teddies will begin spawning in the hallways, and they'll all need to be dealt with before proceeding. Arb also makes use of standing on a chocolate spawn, just in case Conker sustains any injuries, and then once the room is clear, they head inside. Outside, we can see a group of teddies surrounding Conker's friend Rodent with a firing squad. Luckily, his armor is bulletproof, and Arb takes out each of the teddies to save him. Rodent offers to shield Conker from all incoming fire from bombers, as well as spider mines. In total, there will be 6 airstrikes and 3 spider mines to deal with, as well as a ton of RNG involving Rodent's movements, as he can just stop moving sometimes, which can be a bit frustrating. To avoid the airstrikes, Arb will just hug the walls, or move backward to dodge them, and then hide behind Rodent to take care of the spider mines. In this run, Rodent manages to troll Arb quite a bit, stopping several times, but what can you do? Arb will want to maintain as much health as possible for the next section. After reaching the end, the duo will stumble across a door, and Conker will need to shoot out the locks with a context-sensitive pad before proceeding. During this entire ordeal, Conker will be getting shot from several different angles, so we'll want to be quick. Just after shooting the last lock, Arb clears an enemy out of the way, and then heads forward through the doors. In the next area, Conker gains access to a tank, and Arb will use it to blow up an entryway inside the building. Arb grabs some extra health, and then heads inside. The extra health they grab ends up being very necessary, as they purposely jump into the waist here to give Conker invincibility frames to blow up the final spider mine without taking damage. At the end of the area there's a lever, and after it's pulled, the area will begin filling with waste. Arb will then head back from where they came and hop back into the tank. What's interesting here is that on the N64, it's possible to recalibrate the stick, and by doing so while holding back, makes it so the tank moves at a much faster speed. So fast that you're able to skip dropping 2 of the bridges with a speed boost. But since Arb is playing on Xbox, they'll just go through here the intended way. In the center of the area, there's a gun on top of this tower, and all 4 pillars surrounding it need to be shot by the tank to knock it down. Also, since N64 strats can't be used here, Conker will need to drop down each bridge in order to proceed. Luckily, the pillar that you normally shoot last can be accessed early by driving down this hill, meaning we can skip the final bridge, but for all the others, Arb will need to be careful to avoid getting blown up by grenades. Once the tower is toppled over, a hole will appear where the tower was, and we'll head through to proceed. In the center of the next area, Conker finds a little girl looking for their mom. But weirdly, this girl knows a surprising amount about the heavy artillery used for submarines. Conker disregards this, only focused on how she probably has rich parents, and begins taking out the nearby submarines. The hitboxes for these subs can be a bit sketchy, so it's best to wait for them to surface above the water for the best results. For the first round of subs, 3 will need to be taken out. For the second round, 5 need to be cleared, and then for the third, a total of 7 will need to be exploded. It's important that these are dealt with quickly to prevent Conker from ever getting shot at, wasting time. It's also possible to shoot 2 subs with 1 shot, like we see Arb do here. Once the final sub is destroyed, Arb will grab a piece of chocolate and head back to the little girl. Just before helping her out of the hole, Rodent appears with a tank, warning Conker not to touch her. The girl reveals herself to be evil, and also attached to a giant teddy, leading to a boss fight versus the 2 of them. This boss fight is actually insane to watch perform quickly. Basically, each wave the giant teddy will start with a new weapon of sorts to attack Conker with, but by shooting out both weapons and shooting the girl, the teddy will end up turning around, exposing his back, allowing for direct damage. Rinse and repeat the strategy 3 times, and the boss fight is over. After concluding the fight, Conker finds Rodent, presumably dead on the ground, but he doesn't have much time to mourn as the little girl activates a self-destruct sequence with the giant teddy, and a countdown begins to leave the area. The next section is definitely the sketchiest when it comes to tight movement to avoid the red lasers, knowing if you touch even a single one, it could cost the entire run. After reaching the end of the area, Arb stands on a vantage point on top of this box, and begins taking out the room of teddies with a rocket launcher. This spot seems really nice to shoot from, so you can get a good shot at all the teddies, and also don't have to risk shooting a wall, blowing up Conker. I know this section was probably a lot of people's most difficult to clear, so it's crazy to see it speedran through so effortlessly. Upon leaving the room, Conker's back on the beach, and Arb heads back through the barbed wire fence to reach a boat, officially ending the war portion of the game. During the end sequence of this chapter, Rodent can be seen waking up from being knocked out, only to have just a few seconds left on the countdown timer, and then the place explodes. Rodent can be seen flying in the distance overhead the boat. Upon returning to Windy, we can see that Rodent's armor seemed to have taken out the entire windmill. Conker heads inside anyways, leading to the Feral Reserve, where Don Weezo and Barry can be found towards the entrance. The boss apparently has one more job for Conker and Barry, and that's for them to rob the bank. Conker has one condition though, and that he also gets a cool Matrix-style suit similar to Barry's. This is honestly my favorite section of the game, just due to the references and cinematic cutscenes. For this first section, waves of guards will need to be taken out in order to proceed deeper into the hallway. The first phase just has 2 waves of 2 guards. For the second and third phases, there will be 3 guards each wave, and then for the final phase, there will be 4. The main strat is to just wait behind the pillars until the weasels come out, and then shoot them all in one jump per wave. Arb manages to clear this super quickly, taking advantage of the quicker aiming on Xbox. Now we head into the endgame. In the vault room, Barry manages to disable all the traps and open the vault, leading to an entire room filled with cash. Conker needs to grab 3 wads of cash before the game will time-lapse him to reach a millionaire status. The celebration is short-lived, however, as Barry points out the Panther King is sitting right behind them. As it turns out, the whole operation was a setup coordinated by the King and Don Weezo to capture Conker to repair his table. Barry steps up to confront the King on Conker's behalf, but this backfires, and Don Weezo takes her out with a machine gun. As Conker mourns, the King begins to get a bit uneasy as he has indigestion from not drinking his milk, and commands the professor to give him a glass. But as it turns out, the professor has been plotting against the King this entire time, incubating an alien inside him, bearing a striking resemblance to the movie of the same name. And just like how the alien is dealt with in the movie, we'll need to open the airlock and throw it outside. Arb begins by pulling the nearby lever to reveal a spacesuit and open the airlock. Everything in the room, including Barry's body and the professor, gets sucked into space. For being the final boss, this fight isn't too bad. There are 3 different actions the alien can do, including a spin move, a bite, or the boss will move backwards. For the first attack, it doesn't matter if the alien spins or bites, but for the remaining attacks, it's best just to wait for the alien to bite for the easiest to respond to opening. Once an opening is found, the alien needs to be hit 4 times to stun it. Once it's stunned, Arb will grab its tail from behind and begin Mario 64 spinning it to throw it outside. After 3 throws, the boss will be defeated and the speedrun is complete. All things considered, this was a very clean run from Arb, beating their personal best by 39 seconds, resulting in the first and only 1 hour 21 minute time ever achieved. The game ends with Conker relentlessly trying to get the alien out of the room to no avail, and then just before its final attack, the game freezes. After one of the most hilarious 4th wall breaks I've ever seen, where Conker clears out the background and spawns in several weapons of choice, he grabs a gun as well as a sword. Then he transports to the Panther King's throne room. Conker unpauses the game and cuts the alien's head off, securing his victory. Conker is approached by some of the earlier cast of characters as they point out the throne is vacant and they want him to step up as the new king of the land. Conker then realizes in hindsight In the moment where he essentially had god powers, he should have brought Barry back to life, but it's too late now. Conker is placed on the throne with a crown on head, glass of milk in hand, and the game fades out to a very grumpy Conker surrounded by everyone he hates, thus concluding Conker's bad for a day. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Be sure to drop a like, as that's the best way to show support. Initially I was planning on learning the speedrun and doing runs myself, but I just really couldn't get into the game due to the controls, but I still found the speedrun very interesting, especially at the world record level, and I wanted to cover it. So special thanks again to Arbliterator for letting me use their run, as well as helping me with all the info. Their Twitch and YouTube channels will be linked below. Since I wasn't playing this game as much, I do have a handful of other projects I've been working on that are taking a lot more time to complete, but be sure to be on the lookout for them once they come out. That's all I have to say for today's video. Subscribe for more speedrunning related content, and as always, I hope you all have a beautiful life.